Hi, good afternoon, everyone. One moment, we're letting in some other people. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We appreciate you taking time out of your lunch hour to join us. We are holding this meeting this afternoon to go over the future land use section update. Before we begin, and Jen, just a heads up, I'm seeing some team stuff pop up. Before we begin the more intensive outreach in the summer, we wanted to go over what is being proposed and some of the details so that folks have the latest information about the process in the future land use update. And before we dive into the presentation, I'll ask the team to introduce themselves. I'm Melissa Dickens, Division Director of Strategic Planning, Environmental, and Research with the Planning Commission, and I'm one of the co-leads on this project along with Jennifer Malone. Jennifer?
Hey, I'm Jennifer Malone. I'm the City of Tampa liaison and executive planner at the Planning Commission.
Evan Johnson, City Planning Interim Director.
Hi, I'm Lauren O'Neill. I'm one of the senior planning coordinators in city planning.
Great. Again, we appreciate everyone being here. A couple of housekeeping things. We're going to be going through the presentation and then taking questions at the end. The way that we have this meeting set up is the Q&A function up at the top. You should be able to open the Q&A and submit your question. We will then, when the presentation is done, be going through the questions in the order in which they are received. So if you see something on a slide and you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the queue and our team will see it. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please email planner@plancom.org and we will have someone try to work with you on addressing those technical issues. Next slide, Jen, we'll go ahead and get started. So just an overview, today's presentation is really to cover the nuts and bolts, the who, the what, the where, the why, the how on the comprehensive plan update, the future land use update, and the process. We'll talk about what each document is, what it does, what we've heard so far, what is being proposed, and resources. Some of this might be familiar to many of you all who have been with us throughout this update process, which has been taking place since 2022. But we do have many new folks who are joining us for the first time at this meeting. So we wanted to go through everything that we've been working on, share the process and what to expect. We will also be touching on how we use the future land use update in our long-term planning. I'll also be going over what we heard in the first round of outreach. Then I'll turn it over to Jennifer so she can go over the changes in detail and also some resources. And then finally, we'll take questions in Q&A format. Again, you should see the Q&A button at the top of your screen. If you have a question, please click that and the question will be sent to our staff and read aloud and answered. We can also use that function for comments as well. So why are we here? Excuse me, that is a slide that we used yesterday. We had the same presentation, but at noon today, we are here to build on the engagement that we began back in 2022. Again, we heard some folks were unable to participate in the process the first time. So today we're here to share what's proposed and specifically based on the Tampa City Council direction on May 22nd, work with the community to have additional outreach and engagement over the summer. There are a couple of topics that Tampa City Council specifically wanted us to focus on. Those will really be focused on more in depth at the neighborhood meetings. We have a couple of meetings set up and we're working to schedule those other two, but those will be specific meetings for each council district. So there will be 4 of those meetings in total and we'll be diving into those topics. And we'd also appreciate your help if you know friends or neighbors who weren't able to make the presentation today or last night. The presentations will be recorded. They'll be posted on our website, and we'll also be sharing information with all of the attendees about the schedule for the future in-person meetings in each council district. Next slide. We wanted to briefly go over the entities that are involved in updating the plan. There are a number of organizations and also community members who have been involved in the update. Most importantly, I really want to underscore the last bullet, which is you. We have a number of folks who are here joining us, and we really want to hear your thoughts on the update and hear your questions and comments. Next slide. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the organization that Jennifer and I work for. This is the Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission. This is an independent consolidated planning agency. We have a board made up of appointed citizens that does all of the long-range comprehensive planning for all 4 local governments in Hillsborough County. They make recommendations to the local elected officials, so in this case, Tampa City Council. Next slide. And a little bit about the composition of our planning commission. There are 10 voting members, 4 each from the city of Tampa, as well as unincorporated county, 1 from Plant City and 1 from Temple Terrace. And then there are a couple of ex officio members as well. Okay, going into the comprehensive plan, which is the document which within the future land use section lives. The comprehensive plan is required for all local governments in the state of Florida. It is intended to be a long-range planning document that covers a number of different topics that are related to future development, everything from housing, mobility, infrastructure, the environment. And the comprehensive plan is adopted by Tampa City Council. And so all rezonings and developments must be consistent with the plan. And I may have missed saying this on a previous slide, but the Planning Commission, that board, makes a recommendation to Tampa City Council. So the Planning Commission will give a recommendation, and then ultimately the final decision-making authority on the comprehensive plan on plan amendments lies with Tampa City Council. Next slide. And this is a link, if you haven't looked at the comprehensive plan before, there is one that is adopted and in effect today. It's our Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and you can access that plan and all of its components at the link below. This is what we are working on updating right now. Next slide. Okay, going into future land use, or you might hear it referred to as the FLU. This is the long-term land use vision that designates land uses for the city. It determines where different uses will go, like residential, retail, industrial. It establishes specific development policies, and we heard a lot of comments leading up to the Tampa City Council meeting on May 22nd about zoning and rezoning. We do want to specify and clarify, and I'll go into this a little bit more later, but future land use is different from zoning. The future land use is really the 35,000 comprehensive view and a broader planning framework than zoning. Next slide. This is the adopted future land use map. This is what is in effect today for the community. You can see it's a little bit blurry here, but if you go on our website, there's an easier one to read, but there's different categories over on the right-hand side that correspond to different maximum allowable densities and intensities, as well as use types that you can see throughout the map. Next slide. And a little more detail about how the future land use is different from zoning. The FLU, again, is a broader planning framework. It's really the bird's eye view of what the community wants to see long term. And the Land Development Code is more of a regulatory document where there are specific development standards and procedures. So if you're trying to find out what is the maximum amount of units that could go on my property, not any details about what it looks like or things like that, that would be in the future land use section. But if you're getting more granular, looking at setbacks, building height that is in the land development code. So I wanted to share a little bit more about those differences. So I wanted to again thank our city partners for this effort. It's really been a partnership. We've been working together since 2022 to collaborate on this process. Next slide. And we began this process a couple of years ago, again, 2022, by creating a vision and asking the community what they wanted to see. We had an initial vision survey and a number of outreach meetings. We got over 1,000, or excuse me, about 1,000 responses, and we read all of the responses, looked at them, tried to whittle them down, and created a vision statement and 9 vision themes. So these vision themes represent what the community told us they wanted to see in 2045. There are a number of components and themes that you'll see throughout the future land use update, things like resiliency, neighborhoods, housing options, diverse economy. We have worked throughout the update of the entire comprehensive plan to point back to this vision because it's really a guiding document on what we heard from the community. Next slide. I'm going to talk now a little bit more about the approach to the update. It started with a wholesale review to streamline and consolidate the language. The current adopted plan has 20 goals for just the future land use section. And through this update draft, we brought it down to about 7. We've been working very closely with city staff and stakeholders starting in 2022 and conducting outreach at multiple phases through today. Next slide. We've held a number of different visioning sessions, town halls, stakeholder meetings, and then also worked to make sure that we use all of our digital and technological resources. So having some interactive polls, there is a project website that we'll share later, and then an interactive web map that outlines the changes as well. Next slide. And just a quick snapshot of the first phase of the outreach. We met with a number of different stakeholder groups throughout the city, everything from neighborhood leaders to the development community to a number of the other kind of quasi-governmental organizations and entities. Next slide. Okay, so just sharing a little bit about what we heard throughout the first part of the outreach and engagement. It was very clear that there were 3 top issues facing Tampa residents: housing choices, transportation, and housing affordability. There were also comments about coastal resiliency, having flexibility for development, but also making sure that there was clarity and certainty within the plan. There was some feedback that some of the bonuses that were proposed needed additional nuance, as well as clear criteria for implementation. And you'll see some of these, just going back, if you wouldn't mind, thanks. Some of these components you'll see in some of the recommended updates. We really worked to address what we heard from the community about particularly the top 3 choices: housing choices, transportation, and housing affordability. And you'll see some of that in some of the tools that Jennifer's going to go over as part of the update. Next slide. And we also wanted to share some of the feedback that we got on the first draft. So we released a first draft of the FLU in August of last year, and we got a lot of great comments and input, and we have worked to incorporate, we read every single comment that we received and then worked to see how we could incorporate it into the plan. So wanted to share this so that you can see some of the feedback that we got on the initial draft that has since been incorporated into the draft that is live today. Next slide. And I think this is where I turn it over to Jennifer to go through the details of what we're proposing. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So we're proposing, as Ms. Dickens pointed out earlier, we have over 20 goals in the Tampa Future Land Use section. So we're looking at simplifying those down to 7 proposed goals. There's also a place types proposed that is essentially splitting the city up into certain types of how we would expect certain development to be encouraged in certain areas of the city. There's a bonus structure as well. We're revising some of the future land use category revisions, promoting neighborhood mixed use, which is something that we heard a lot about in our outreach. There's a housing needs, some proposals that will hopefully help address some of the housing needs that we've heard throughout this outreach and feedback, as well as some updates to the coastal high hazard area policy and some updates to the industrial language that will hopefully help strengthen those economic assets. And then here are our 7 goals. I do like to point out that goal 1 is citizen participation in the planning process, because that's really important and that's why we're here today. So we definitely want to hear from all of you. And we've built that into the first goal of the future land use section. The place types and bonus structure is one of the new proposals in the future land use, splitting the city up into certain types. So regional activity centers, transit ready corridors, and context sensitive neighborhoods. And I'll get into what each of those means in the next slide. Within those place types, a bonus structure has been proposed that will incentivize high density and intensity development within regional activity centers, and mid-tier development along the transit-ready corridors. Transit-ready corridors, we can think of, those are essentially the arterials in the city of Tampa. So Hillsborough Avenue, Florida Avenue, Dale Mabry, those are good examples of some of our transit-ready corridors in the city as proposed. There's also 2 new bonuses proposed for affordable housing and green development, because we did hear a lot about housing needs as well as being resilient, future development being resilient in the city. So these are the place types. Regional activity centers, that's the central business district which is downtown, as well as the Fowler Vision area and the West Shore Business District. So of those 3, probably the newest one is the Fowler Vision area, because the Planning Commission recently completed a visioning study in coordination with the county and the city for what Fowler should really look like as we move forward and as it redevelops. So those are our 3 regional activity centers in the city. A 4th regional activity center are what we call transit supportive development areas, which is places that we have fixed guideway rail now, which is the streetcar and the perimeter of the streetcar rail, and then where we would expect that in the future. And we have some policy language that helps guide that development and when that bonus can be utilized. Transit ready corridors, as I said on the last slide, those are our major roadways in the city. We're expecting a mid-tier bonus and mid-tier development that really needs to remain sensitive and compatible to the neighborhoods that we know are within close proximity to those roadways. Finally, context sensitive neighborhoods. These are areas that are experiencing the effects of redevelopment surrounding their neighborhood. In the plan today, a lot of these areas are referred to as urban villages. We've retained all of the urban villages and then added some more areas that we think deserve this designation. Carver City Lincoln Gardens is a good example of a neighborhood that's been added as a context sensitive neighborhood, because it is surrounded by a very high future land use designation and surrounded by a regional activity center, which is West Shore. This is a map of our proposed place types. The green are the regional activity centers, as well as the red showing the central business district and the boundary, the central business district boundary, which is, or the periphery, excuse me, the CBD periphery boundary, which is essentially a circle around downtown that also has a bonus built in. The blue are transit ready corridors. We worked very closely with HART and our transportation planning organization and the City of Tampa Mobility Department when we were deciding which corridors should be designated as transit ready corridors. And then finally, the purple are those context sensitive neighborhoods. The bonus structure that ties in with the place types seeks to provide public benefits in exchange for those bonus awards, and it would hopefully greatly increase the role of affordable housing in qualifying for the bonus. We heard a lot at the beginning of this process about the importance of affordable housing and more housing types in the city, and a great tool to do that we have in the toolbox is a bonus structure. This is the bonus structure graphic. I know it's a lot to kind of look at on the screen right now. We do have this on our website if anybody would like to study it later. But the main takeaway here is that it's a choose your own adventure, like a mix and match type, how it's proposed. So a development, if they're seeking a density bonus, can do all affordable housing, or they can stack an affordable housing bonus with that transit ready bonus if they are within that transit ready corridor designation. The big takeaway here as well is that there are ceilings built into the categories. And whether you do one bonus or multiple bonuses and mix and match, you cannot go above the project ceiling, which is displayed in Project C. That would not be allowed if that project tried to go above the ceiling established in the future land use section. We've also taken a look at the category revisions. It's a little confusing right now because community mixed use 35 does not mean 35 dwelling units an acre. It's 30 by right and then up to 35 with a bonus. Through this update, we're revising that category name and then revising the density within the coastal high hazard area, the density outside of the coastal high hazard area, proposing that bonus option of up to 70 dwelling units an acre. I do just want to point out, we'll get to this in a couple slides, bonuses are prohibited in the coastal high hazard area, except in certain areas. Neighborhood mixed use. There's some policy updates that we hope would promote neighborhood mixed use in the city, such as allowing the neighborhood mixed use future land use designation citywide. It's an underutilized category, and we think that there's a lot of opportunity there for that to be promoted elsewhere in the city, as well as expanding where neighborhood mixed use can occur within a neighborhood. So we already have commercial locational criteria within the city in certain future land use categories, but there's a proposal to expand where that could be applied, such as on a site that has frontage on 2 collector or arterial roadways. This slide covers our community input on housing needs to date. We've had some outreach findings. Respondents ranked missing middle housing, such as townhomes and duplexes, as the most needed housing types in Tampa. We've had multiple stakeholder listening sessions, which did reveal some broad support for a range of housing types along corridors and within neighborhoods. And so we're hoping that another proposal would really help address these concerns, and that proposal would be establishing criteria for the location of single family attached housing in the R10, which is basically townhomes. So today, this is the language that townhomes, limited townhomes and duplexes can be considered within the residential 10 future land use category, but it doesn't really specify the exact locations for these uses. And the plan generally supports encouraging them at the periphery of established single family neighborhoods. But one thing that we heard throughout this process that Melissa Dickens touched on earlier is that folks really wanted some more clarity in the development process and some more understanding of where exactly these uses can go. So we took a look at that criteria, at establishing some criteria. So we would be able to provide council and then residents with exact understanding of where townhomes can go in that residential 10 future land use designation. So we landed with if it has fronts a collector or a higher classified roadway. A collector is a mid-tier roadway, so a good example of that would be Himes or Henderson. If it's adjacent to a parcel with a higher density or intensity future land use category, and if it's located on a transit ready corridor boundary. There's additional requirements here proposed that it cannot exceed a 0.8 FAR. That is to control the massing and the scale. And that 0.8 FAR is just would equate to the total square footage that they could build with utilizing this policy. I do also want to point out there is a round up provision if these criteria are met outside of the coastal high hazard area, where somebody would have the opportunity to get to the nearest whole unit. So typically we round down. So if the math worked out that somebody's has a 1/6 acre lot and I multiply that by 10, the result is 1.6. So today I would say you can only have one dwelling unit. Under this proposal, and if the criteria is met, that scenario would have the an opportunity to round up to the nearest whole unit. And then here's some example of the missing middle housing that we are really hoping to promote and encourage throughout the city. The coastal high hazard areas is another big part of this update. A little background is that the CHHA is established and updated by the state of Florida. And these are areas particularly vulnerable to the effects of coastal flooding. A good way to describe this is that it's typically, but not always, the lands within evacuation zone A. And that is established by a slosh computerized storm model and then placed on the adopted future land use map. And so that helps guide development in the city of Tampa. The adopted policy direction right now, which is on the furthest left-hand part of the screen, is that future population concentrations should be directed away from the coastal high hazard area to achieve a no net increase. Based on feedback, again, from our stakeholders and from City Council, on April 7th, when we went to the Planning Commission meeting, staff proposed this language in the middle slide that plan amendments should be prohibited within the coastal high hazard area. Planning Commission voted to continue the public hearing to May 12th and also gave staff some feedback that language should be revised. And so the last column is what staff came back with to the Planning Commission on May 12th, some minor adjustments, just stating that no plan amendments within the CHHA shall increase that maximum residential density. And here is the coastal development or the coastal high hazard area map in green. The red shading is the coastal development areas. So those are areas in the city that we do anticipate some growth and development should be able to occur that maybe have special plans or funding mechanisms to promote that and encourage that, and to also place certain infrastructure improvements for resiliency. So a good example are the community redevelopment areas. The West Shore Business District has a special services taxing district. And then also areas that are naturally transitioning away from industrial to residential units. So the good example of this is the far southern portion of the city, just north of McDill. This is a little area of the city that has some remnant light industrial parcels that are on single family lots. And so we want to definitely encourage that transition from light industrial to residential 10. If anybody requests a plan amendment within the boundaries of this area, they would only be able to request it to residential 10 category, which would be single family attached or single family detached, typically single family attached and townhome if meeting that criteria. Again, strengthening economic assets. This is something that we took a look at the industrial language in the comprehensive plan now and proposed an industrial preservation map to identify those areas for protection, as well as clear criteria to identify future industrial areas suitable for preservation or expansion. So this slide is just showing our great economic assets that we have in the city of Tampa that we want to be able to support. A good takeaway from this slide is the Port of Tampa Bay, because what ended up on the industrial preservation map was our area, anything in the Port Activity Center, as well as some industrial near the Tampa Airport. What is not on the industrial preservation map is the Tampa Industrial Park in the Fowler Vision area, because we have a plan and some guidance for how the Fowler Vision area will redevelop, and industrial uses wasn't really what came out of that process and that study. So that's not on the industrial preservation map. Enhancing historic preservation. We've taken a look at this section, worked closely with our partners at the City of Tampa, and refined some existing language for clarity in these policies, as well as promoting compatible development along the historic district edges. This is a list of resources where you can find out more about the Tampa Comprehensive Plan update. Live, Grow, Thrive 2045 is our landing page, and you should be able to access all of these links from there. We do have an interactive mapping tool that I would encourage everybody to take a look at. We've mapped a lot of these policy proposals, and so you can see how they would affect your neighborhood specifically. We have, based on council's motion on May 22nd, we will be conducting district meetings this summer. So 4 meetings, one for each city council district. We have the City Council District 6 and City Council District 4 scheduled and set for July 16th and then August 4th. We will be announcing more of those dates soon. I'm also happy to come to neighborhood meetings if we have that request and discuss these, discuss the update. And we're hoping that City Council will review this again on August 28th. Thank you so much for participating, and I think we're ready to take a Q&A.
Alrighty. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and start going through the Q&A. If you have not already, please feel free to put your question in the Q&A box. Again, that's at the top of your meeting screen. And we again want to encourage everyone to put their questions in there. I'm going to read them aloud in the order in which they came, and send that over to the rest of our staff to answer. We want to ensure that we get through all the questions before the meeting ends. And so again, wanting to be respectful of everyone's time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question. It actually has several questions in one, so I'll read each individually. What is the existing and proposed changes for the CHA development, zone development?
Jennifer, do you want to pull up the CHHA map again, and I can respond while you're getting that pulled up? So essentially, as Jennifer went through, and she'll go through these slides again, we're changing the language to be a little more specific with respect to the coastal high hazard area. The way that it was, can you go back to the 3, that one? Yeah. There's one that, so you can see now the language in the plan is pretty general. An overall no net increase, that's something that we heard is, it's hard to measure. There's not a lot of certainty. We then had a proposal as staff, and then the change that is in the plan today is, and this kind of speaks to the density question, but no plan amendments for a parcel within the CHHA shall increase the maximum residential density or intensity beyond what is allowed by the existing future land use category. So if you go to the map, Jennifer, the one that you were on. So again, this applies for the areas in the green. There are the coastal development areas where there would be allowances for plan amendments. Within the CHHA itself, there are no bonuses and no plan amendments, so within the green. But then within the coastal development areas, the red, that is where there are additional funding mechanisms, there are additional plans for redevelopment, like CRAs, and also within, for example, the West Shore Business District. That is where staff felt that there was enough certainty about future infrastructure improvements, plans for redevelopment, that exceptions could be made within those coastal development areas. And Erica, did I answer, was there another part of that question?
Yes, and I think you touched on it. So the following question was, will the CHHA zones allow bonus density for development? Are CHH zones protected from future added density?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes,
that is the intent, is to protect this protect the CHHA from future plan amendments that increase density or intensity. The language is worded that the applicant still has the ability to apply, but the intent is to not allow future density or intensity increases over what is allowed today in the green. And same thing with the bonuses.
And Melissa Dickens, if I can just chime in there.
Sure.
I do just want to point out that doesn't mean that there's a prohibition on development in the CHHA, because there may still be entitlements and potential for somebody to add more units under their existing future land use category. That would just require a rezoning. So if it's already has the color on the map that they need to develop what they need to, then that's not something that we can control through this process. We would just be looking at new amendments to the map that would increase the total amount of development that they could do.
Thanks.
And I think you touched on this a little bit as well. Is there a deterrent or prohibition of zoning, land use, and PD's
Oh.
changes that add density within the CHH zones, such as changing residential to commercial zoning within the CHHA allowed?
Right, that's not part of this update. And that's not something that the future land use plan can necessarily control. If the property has that future land use category that would allow consideration of that zoning. Because we've planned for those units and we're looking for no increases above that on the category.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to another question. How are you addressing neighborhood streets that are already overbuilt? Is there a maximum number of transitional building types per street?
Sure, there's not a maximum number of transitional building types per street, but that is some really good feedback and something that, we can definitely explore, which is why we're doing the summer outreach, is to hear those ideas. We do have policy language that would encourage transition as a development moves away from a corridor and into the neighborhood and encourage that compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood.
Thank you. Okay, next, the following two proposed policies contradict each other. What is the bottom line? Would bonuses be allowed in the CHHA in non-coastal development areas? And the policies they're referencing is Land Use Policy 2.6.9, which says bonus awards are prohibited within the CHHA except within coastal development areas. And then Land Use Policy 7.1.4, explore the feasibility through the LDC of allowing future density bonuses or plan amendment increases in the CHHA when the developer agrees to construct or invest in infrastructure improvements that the city deems will enhance the resiliency of the surrounding area.
Sure. So 7.1.4 was a result of a motion by the Planning Commission. And so we were directed to put their motion that essentially said what the policy says into policy form. So today the proposal is that those bonuses should be prohibited under 2.6.9. But 7.1.4 does open the door for through the Land Development Code at a later date, if it's feasible, working with our city partners to perhaps have bonuses one day. But we would need to work closely with Evan Johnson at the City of Tampa through the code update if that's even feasible. But that's why that policy is worded as explore the feasibility. I wouldn't say it necessarily contradicts, those policies contradict each other, because 2.6.9 is setting out the adopted direction today. There's no bonuses in the CHHA unless they're in a coastal development area. 7.1.4 is just looking towards the future. If it's feasible, if we can do more outreach like this and work with our city partners and find a way to make it work. So I would just turn that over to Evan Johnson if he has anything to add on that question.
Yeah, I would only add that to Jennifer's point, this is not it's not an instruction necessarily, it's a suggestion to explore it. Ultimately, the intent and the reason why it was added was the Planning Commission thought that it might not be a bad idea if a development was providing extra resilient infrastructure or going above and beyond from a purely resiliency standpoint, that they may be allowed to consider a bonus. This is similar to what there are some bonuses in St. Pete that allows for that type of bonusing. Honestly, we, from a city's perspective, it is not something that we would necessarily be planning on pursuing outside of city council or the administration directing us to move forward with those changes. And at that time, it would be a public process. where we would have a conversation as to whether or not that council would even want to consider those types of bonuses at that time. So that's why it was added. Ultimately, it could be considered if city council or administration directed us to look into it, but it would be a public process to do so.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, why doesn't the proposed R10 criteria take into account the current comp plan description of South Tampa on page 14 of Imagine 2040? New Tampa and South Tampa districts. These two districts are predominantly traditional single-family detached neighborhoods that share one or more of the following characteristics: environmental qualities that would be compromised by increased urbanization, limited access to transportation facilities, which would be resource inefficient to improve, limited opportunities to create more community facilities, open spaces or services to meet increased demand, or unstable or flood-prone land.
Sure. So I think in your question, it says, why doesn't the proposed R10 criteria take into account the current comp plan description of South Tampa, which is a great word to use when we talk about that section of the plan. It is just a description. It's not adopted policy. It's in the narrative section of the plan. And we have looked at the narrative section and determined what can be applied in policy format through the place types that we've proposed in this update. And we're also not utilizing planning districts in the same way either. So that's why you may not see in the draft South Tampa called out as specifically as it is today in the plan. I know Melissa Dickens muted herself. I'll let her respond.
Yeah, I was just going to add, appreciate this question. So just to clarify on the R10 today, townhomes are allowed in the R10. The density of the R10 is staying the same, the overall R10. There's not a change in terms of allowing townhomes. We're just trying to provide more criteria about where they are. So just wanted to add that note as well.
And if I may, I was just going to add that the plan itself is very much, and the policies being proposed is very much a balance between different competing interests and policy objectives. So a couple things about R10 that I would like to make sure is clear, because that is some narrative within the current plan that speaks to those characteristics. First, I would just say that we've already kind of talked about the fact that the plan as it stands now is recommending greatly restricting, if not completely restricting, increases of density within the coastal high hazard area, which would include R10 areas. Right now, the plan, while it is restrictive, it is also pretty ambiguous at times. It opens still not very clear as to what it means. And so there's been a lot of debate and decision and discussion around that. So it's really clarifying to restrict further density increases in the coastal high hazard area. Makes up a significant portion of South Tampa. The bonuses themselves, R10 is not being bonused outside of the transit ready corridor area, which is very much focused on these major corridors, say in South Tampa. That's a Del Mabry would be the best example in South Tampa. But in the remainder of TRC or the remainder of R10 outside of the coastal high hazard area, we're not allowing an increase in density. It is not, you're not going to be able to achieve a bonus, very much remaining as is. So I would argue that I think that, the development pattern of South Tampa specifically, because that's what was brought up, and New Tampa will continue to be predominantly single family through the 2045 timeline. Remember, this is a 20-year plan. However, we also acknowledge that there will be growth, and we're trying to get growth to incentivize and encourage growth in the right locations that makes the most sense, not only for the neighborhoods, but also for infrastructure, transit, et cetera. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, what is the difference between an attached townhome and a multifamily townhome?
Number of units Typically, a single family attached is, I believe it's 3 units or less. And a multifamily development is going to be more than that. So a row of townhomes is considered a multifamily. A duplex, where you have two townhomes side by side, one shared wall, that would be a single family attached development. So that's the main difference.
All right, so in the CHHA, does the roundup provision not apply?
That is correct.
Have any processes been implemented or currently being worked on to ensure the updates resonate and land with council members in efforts to keep the value of the comp plan intact? The comp plan has seemed to take a backseat for council at times when not literally in front of them.
I can take a stab at this one. Yeah, that's why we're here today. So we've been at council a couple times throughout this process, explaining these changes and working very closely with our city partners on telling council what the comprehensive plan can do and how it can be utilized by them. But this is a great question, something for us to keep in mind as we go through this outreach, and we really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the council has been very engaged in this update. I think, it's been 5 or 6, I don't remember the exact number, that we've had workshops with them on the specific update. We've also had council members attending meetings, interested in neighborhood meetings. There's been the direction from council was to have a specific meeting in each council district. So do just want to underscore that council has been very engaged throughout this process. And then they also see any proposed changes to the plan that come in from private applicants, as well as rezonings on a regular basis. So the comprehensive plan is something that is frequently something that they're looking at, something that they're working with the community on. So just wanted to note that as well. And then just one quick, couple of quick technical housekeeping questions. We're seeing a comment that no questions are visible for participants to view. If you go up and click the new posts button under publish, they should show up. So just want to make sure that folks know how you can see the questions that were asked and answered. Those should be if you click the new post button. And then one other housekeeping thing, I do see a couple of hands raised. We are going to be taking questions using the Q&A function so that we have all the questions written down. So if you click on the Q&A button at the top of your screen, that's where we'll be responding to questions. We want to make sure that we get to them all. We're going to be reading them in the order in which they are received. So please, if you could go ahead and hit the Q&A button, then we'll make sure that we get to them. Thanks.
Alrighty, how is CHHA density calculated as it applies to hotels, businesses, and other commercial rezoning land use?
Great question. That is not if it is a hotel, business, or other commercial land use, it is not density in the CHHA because those are not residential dwelling units. So that would not apply to the CHHA. Any impacts on shelter space and whatnot are just if it's residential dwelling units, and so hotels, businesses, and commercial would not apply there.
Yeah, and just jumping in to add to that, we did hear a lot of feedback about folks wanting more opportunities for neighborhood commercial. And one of the things that often gets away in that is when there's a change to a mixed use land use category, which allows both residential and commercial. Staff does not recommend increases in density in the CHHA. And so we have developed a new comprehensive plan category. There's been a lot of changes and we wanted to touch on the highlights today, but there is a commercial restricted category that we're proposing to add as part of this update that would allow people to have a future land use designation that allows commercial only uses. So things like a coffee shop or a neighborhood serving commercial use would be allowed under that new commercial restricted category.
There was another comment. What about when the CHHA expands?
Yeah, so there's certain provisions in the plan, such as the I think it's tough to answer this question because I don't have the context exactly, but if the CHHA expands, then certain provisions would follow, such as the plan amendment provision, no bonuses in the CHHA, et cetera. But then there's other things, the density, the by right density, and the bonus and those intricacies in the future land use table would not change. Since and those I think we have put a date in the comprehensive plan about the CHHA and what would remain if the CHHA expands and what would not. Happy to talk more about that question offline too, so that way we have a fuller understanding of how that applies.
Thanks. Next question, can the Planning Commission provide the public traffic and environmental impact studies specifically in regards to Davis Islands?
I can start this out and then if Evan or Jennifer want to jump in. So the comprehensive plan update is looking at the city holistically. It's the any changes we're looking at. We also on Davis Island, that's where I think this person might be referring to the R10 criteria for townhomes. Again, townhomes are allowed today on Davis Island. It's really the location that we're trying to specify where they are on Davis Island. And because this is kind of a 35,000 foot look, we don't have all of not all of the specific environmental impacts or traffic impacts. Those would really be done at a rezoning stage or a site development stage, because there is more detail about what exactly the development is during that process. So that's when there would be more detailed information on traffic or environmental impact statements. That would happen more at the rezoning stage. We do have a number of studies that were completed by our consultant, as well as mapping on the website. So I'd encourage everyone we'll send it out a link, but to go to the project page, and that's where you can see all the studies related to this project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Okay,
would.
so
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to add to that real quick. I would only add that, in Davis Island instance, it is in the coastal high hazard area. So again, greatly restricted as far as any increase or change in density. Nothing is changing within the comp plan as far as allowable density in that context. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. The next is really more a comment. 7.1.4 was proposed by a developer sitting on the Planning Commission board. The PCB is the bosses of the staff. They had no choice to put it in. It should not even be entertained by anyone.
Thank you. We received your comment.
Another question for the affordable housing bonuses. Would there be resale or deed restrictions on the designated affordable housing units that keep these units affordable for future buyers? If not, there is no guarantee these units stay affordable in the future. If deed restrictions were in place, then what entity would be responsible for monitoring compliance?
2 points, I guess I would make. First of all, I think maybe 3 points. A number of affordable housing, the bonuses and the set-asides will be rental. So those are very common that we do rental set-asides, and those are monitored on an annual basis as far as making sure that they are being rented to families of the right income levels, et cetera. For those houses that are, say, they're a bonus and as part of their bonus provision agreement, which again is how the process works right now, they want to set aside some for sale. I would say first and foremost, just as a general rule or understanding, is that if an affordable unit is set aside for 80% AMI and it is purchased by a household at 80% AMI, you've still provided an opportunity there for an 80% AMI household to afford a house in the city of Tampa, which is important. That is an affordable unit that has been sold. It also is a wealth building opportunity for them if they do decide to sell the property. With that being said, typically with the way it's been done with our housing money, the Housing Community Development Department, the money that the city distributes, generally there is a deed restriction on a house that either sets aside a requirement of a certain amount of time within the deed that is going to be recorded online, or it is something that would require, in some instances, where you could say you can sell it, but you can only sell it for a certain increased amount or something like that to kind of maintain that affordability over time. These are all things that will need to be looked at as we move forward with the actual code update to implement. But we do use deed restrictions now as well when dealing with particularly for sale housing units.
Perfect, thank you. Would that be considered a more stringent standard for the purposes of Senate Bill 180? This is in regards to the location of townhomes in R10.
I can take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. We're working closely with city legal on that, and we will address that when the bill is signed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question. Why is all the language that protects single-family neighborhoods being removed from the comp plan, referencing land use policy 9.5.1, 9.5.4, and 9.5.5?
Yeah, so in some cases, the policies have been reorganized and moved to a different section. So, for example, one of the policies that lived in the old plan is now in a new spot. Land use policy 5.4.4 is an example that kind of encompasses that. It says limit the types and intensity of non-residential uses permitted in single-family residential areas to protect those areas from the negative impacts of incompatible uses. So we can take a look at those. Appreciate you pointing them out. In a lot of cases, there's a lot of duplicative language that we felt it was best to combine or streamline. So we'll take a look at those 3 policies. Thanks.
Thank you. So next question, the policy below directly supports the description on page 14 of Imagine 2040 with South Tampa and its policy. So once again, I ask, how does the fact that South Tampa has both infrastructure and environmental constraints to increased urbanization allow increases to current density? Street flooding is a major problem as evidenced by last year's hurricanes. The infrastructure cannot keep up with the current density now in place. And they're referencing land use policy 9.5.4. I'll let you all read through that.
Sorry, I'm trying to read. It's a long policy.
So I'm really familiar with this policy. That policy applies citywide. It's for all single family areas citywide. This is a new plan with the new place type structure. And we've, like I said, we're not, the new plan is not proposing to utilize planning districts in the same way. Instead, we were going towards place types. Melissa Dickens, I don't know if you would like to add on to this policy at all, and how the new plan and the adopted plan and our review of consistency, if you have anything to add to that. You're on mute.
Story of my life. I will just add that a lot of the policies related to flooding, related to environmental, those are in a couple of other sections of the plan. The One Water chapter, which was updated a few years ago, the environmental and sustainability section, and the coastal management section. So there are a number of components that speak to some of the environmental constraints. We are also currently updating the capital improvements section That draft is out. It's out on the Live, Grow, Thrive page. So there are some additional components related to infrastructure within that capital improvements section.
Thank you. Okay, so next question. For certain streets north of Kennedy, there are townhomes being built on the end of single-family residential streets off arterial roads. The townhome parking is insufficient, garages are small, driveways are short, causing safety issues with street parking and blocked roads for city services. How is parking being addressed within the plan? And instead of transit-ready corridors, were transit hubs considered instead? It seems townhomes on arterial roads could be dangerous with townhome residents pulling into bike lanes, sidewalks, obstructing views, etc.
I I'll let Evan chime in on this too, because I think part of this is more city related, but I do just want to say that we heard some of this yesterday, last night in our meeting about transit hubs should be considered, and I really do appreciate that feedback, and we'll take it into consideration throughout this process. Evan, do you want to address the first part of the question?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that from a plan perspective, we have to remember that the comp plan is a 20-year plan that is laying out what we think is an appropriate use in a certain location. Generally, that's what we're saying. It is a certain mix of uses, as Jennifer has pointed out several times, like in the R10, or we allow townhomes in certain situations now. The new plan is just going to try to clarify that. The R20 has always allowed townhomes, and that is very common, particularly off of Kennedy. There is a good chunk of R20 in and around North Hyde Park and areas like that, where townhomes have been allowed for some time. Parking and driveway design and setbacks, driveway length, all of those things are going to be included in the land development code. And I think it's really important to focus on having those conversations. We are in the process of a major code update. Driveway lengths currently are being discussed as part of a code amendment that will be moving forward in the coming months to ensure that cars that park in a driveway do not block sidewalks or cause some of those issues that were brought up in the comment. But we are, for the first time in at least 50 years, we are in the process of substantially rewriting the land development code. And most of those design concerns and the parking standards and all of that are going to be addressed in the land development code. We really are speaking about kind of land use intensity and types of land uses in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. And I see that we have another comment in here about Carol Ann and Paula having some difficulties with the Q&A function. So they did email some questions. So I'll move on to the next question, but if you all are able to pull those up and address any of those, please feel free to interrupt me so we can answer some of those questions as well. The next question, how has the plan addressed the need for more green space in Tampa? By comparison, St. Pete, Pinellas has more successfully worked to balance parks, green space with their residential development.
Yeah, so I can start with that, and then perhaps Jen or Evan can jump in. So there is a recreation and open space section in the comprehensive plan. Again, that is something that is in draft form right now. If the person wants to email me, dickensm@plancom.org, I can direct you to where that is on our website. You should be able to access it from the Live, Grow, Thrive 2045 page. But one of the things that staff worked closely with city staff is on the provision of open space. There were also a number of plan amendments that were done within the past couple of years to further protect park space from future residential development. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about some of those plan amendments for the parks.
Sure. Yeah. Through 2019 through about 2022, the Planning Commission, at the direction of City Council, initiated a number of amendments to recognize park space as recreational open on the future land use map if it was in the dedicated park list in the land development code. So that definitely increased that category on the map and would um, provide those protections.
And I would only add that um, we have a substantial, massive, if you will, Parks and Rec and park system in the city. I would say that they do have a master plan that has been adopted, and that is kind of directing capital investment in both upgrades and changes and maintenance and new green spaces and open spaces. So that is something that we are constantly looking for. And that master plan lays out areas where that might make the most sense due to shortages of certain types of facilities, et cetera. I think a great example of where parks and mobility and stormwater came together was McDill 48, which is a new green space that also serves multi-purposes. We're always looking for that kind of stuff, even better if we can layer it with, say a stormwater need, a flood measure, or some other improvement. So, it is an ongoing a goal of ours, and I think the plan speaks to that as well.
The next is not necessarily a question, but a supportive statement about how essential these updates are for creating a better process around neighborhood nodes and affordable housing bonuses.
Thank you. We
No.
appreciate that comment. Thank you so much. Sorry, we're trying to find the email. I think we found one question on the TRCs that we're able to answer. The other questions, Carolyn, we're going to have to get back to you. They're pretty detailed, and we're not able to find all the data on the fly. But we can certainly, I think Jen is ready to respond to the TRC question. So I can read that out loud. Please explain again how TRCs were chosen. Has the Transportation Department or HART said they are planning expansion of services on these corridors?
Yeah,
And
so
I'm going to put that in the chat too, so people can see it.
And I'll just say that mirrors, that was an email for the record from Carol Ann about the TRCs, but that mirrors a comment in the Q&A from Tom Connolly on behalf of Carol Ann that says, would you ask them to consider that there are no funds to increase transit on all of these transit ready corridors, and there never will be. So instead of having transit ready corridors all over everywhere, instead would they ask the transportation department to pick the top 3 or 4 locations that would be the most efficient places to increase transit and give those places transit bonuses. So I love this question because we definitely talked about that with Justin Willits when he was at HART in October of 2024. I have an email from him when we were going through this process, and so we worked very closely with HART. One comment that I really like from this email is that he states, I would focus, and this is a quote, I would focus on the ready, in-transit ready corridors aspect of this initiative. Some of these corridor segments are not currently programmed. However, this analysis shows that there is some existing and certainly future demand potential along these corridors, and this will help HART and the local municipalities prioritize future service along them when evaluating existing and future routing alternatives, as well as potentially identifying new and innovative funding mechanisms. Another point is that this is a funding issue, and we know that the transit demand is out there, but HART doesn't have the funding to meet the demand. He adds on that incentivizing more transit-oriented development in density and form, which is essentially what we're getting at with the transit-ready corridors, is one of the only ways in our existing funding paradigm to increase the taxable value, which will directly increase the likelihood of more service. Therefore, bring more funding and density to the corridors where service is mostly already present. So HART we worked closely with them. Bringing density to these corridors is a great way to increase the taxable values of the land, also a great way to then bring more service to the corridors.
I had one other question that came in from someone who was unable to use the mic, or excuse me, the Q&A function. I will go ahead and put this in the chat once I read it, but I understand that if the revised plan amendment is approved by City Council on August 28th, the proposed amendments will then be needed to will then need to be submitted to the state and subsequently heard again in front of City Council 2 more times. If that timeline holds up, what is the estimated timeframe for the proposed amendments to be adopted? Thanks. So yes, I can chime in, and then if I forget something about process, maybe Jen can jump in. But the what is proposed before Tampa City Council on August 28th is the transmittal hearing. That is where City Council would vote to send it to state, regional agencies like the Water Management District, FDOT, a number of the state reviewing agencies. This is part of the requirements under Chapter 163. It would then go to the state. They would have an opportunity to submit comments or objections. It would then go back to Tampa City Council for an adoption hearing. There are 2 times that the ordinance for the adoption is heard, but I believe we are looking at if everything moves according to that schedule for a final adoption by the end of 2025. Jen, did I miss any details on those dates?
That's all good.
Okay, thanks.
There was still one more question that was still in the Q&A box that we missed. I want to make sure we get to. It says, I understand that this is for the new plan, but you are amending the current plan. Why don't we wait until the new plan is finalized instead of amending the current Imagine 2040?
The new plan, this will be the new plan.
Okay.
Susan, are you answering that? Okay. I think I heard a little bit from Susan Johnson. Okay, yep, go ahead.
Oh, I can. So with the update will become the new plan, if we want to kind of refer to them that way. So in order to have a new plan, we have to update what's currently approved.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask if Planning Commission staff could talk a little bit about kind of the regular review and update process, because I'm taking the question as to also speak to that. This is part of a regular review process, is kind of statutorily guided to do it.
Yeah, our last update was in 2016. The state requires us to update the comprehensive plan every 10 years. Or submit a letter to the state stating which we did a couple years ago, how we are in compliance with the state requirements if our plan has not been updated. So we are required to update the plan or else we fall out of compliance. And that's the process that we're going through right now.
I'm not sure if you all saw, someone requested if we could put the rest of Caroline's questions. I'm not sure if you all are able to do that or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them right now, but there's a bunch, so it's taking us some time. And Caroline, I do want to just set the expectation for everyone. Some of these questions are pretty complex, so we might need to talk offline about how we approach these. But I'm happy to put them in the record. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. There's another question. I think also incentivizing transit-ready corridors also helps support the service because there's more people living along the corridors, and that they will use the transit, such as people living along Route 1 have direct access to fare-free Route 1, people with disabilities, working class, people who don't own cars, all over the city, and prioritizing growth in places misses the fact that transit and transit-oriented development is essential for all parts of the city. It's more of a comment.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm not currently seeing any new questions. Trying to publish the last two, but I'm getting an error message, so bear with me. If there are any other questions, again, please put them in the Q&A box so that we're able to read them aloud and have staff answer.
And I think we did run into this last night. Since we're approaching the end of the meeting, we don't have any other questions coming in the chat. I think Daniel, if we could get some help going in the order in which there are questions. I see Michelle Mestrataro as the first person. If we could allow Michelle to unmute, and then I will try my best to summarize the question in the chat for everyone.
Hello?
Actually, oh, there she is. Okay, great. Hi.
Hi. My question is, I see that on the map that we are not in the area where they're focusing on. And our area was deeply affected by overdevelopment and pretty misused by taking our wetland and blocking our chambers. I understand that there has been several meetings in regards to they want to see what has happened in our area, and we have to keep rehashing and bringing our pictures of we losing everything. And this should be more of what can they do. There's so much overdevelopment that they can't say there's no funding. All these apartments, all these buildings, all the apartments next door to me. I mean, they have to be bringing in money. Why can't they fix neglect that has been over 15 plus years? And then think about building and all this other stuff. As much as you care to think, if you build cement on anything, where's that water going to go? It's not going to go there no more. It's going to go to the neighbors. Where is the protection for the neighbors, the single family homes? And how can we fix that moving forward so everyone's at peace? I just don't think it's fair that people had to be subject to stuff like this that are hardworking people. And now we don't know if we're going to be surviving another hurricane. And where is that protection? And moving forward now, the director of mobility is gone. Is there actions? I mean, there's a lot of money. He didn't have a business plan in place. Where is the protection for these families that are living in Port Tampa and losing everything?
Yeah, so I am trying to summarize what you said in the chat, and appreciate you clarifying where you are in Port Tampa. So I'm just gonna summarize what I heard, that you're in an area that has had some overdevelopment issues, impacts to wetlands, and there is some fear and trepidation about hurricanes, and where is the protection for Port Tampa City. And one of those protections is the coastal high hazard area. Evan, I'm sorry, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, just a couple of things, since I think I know a little bit about the context of some of the comments that were just made. I just wanted to mention that the discussion about there is a stormwater master planning effort that was planned prior to the storms. but is literally looking at every portion of the city and developing a specific project list for every portion of the city to really act as the long range stormwater investment plan over the course of years, whether that's the 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year period. There was a recent request I know that went out asking for pictures of storm impacts. I believe that went out from mobility to areas that were known to have flooding issues. And I believe that was part in supporting that study, as there's a number of consultants working on it. They're trying to really understand how the different watersheds are working and where what kinds of improvements can actually be made to address some of those issues. So I just wanted to kind of say that is part of that process. And so the discussion about pictures and things like that, that was a request that went out with mobility. That is an ongoing study that is very much underway. Council had pushed it last year, I believe, to get started prior to the storms. To Melissa's point about the CHHA policies, again, from a comprehensive plan perspective, that is one of the things that we can do with the comprehensive plan is to further restrict increases in density or in the coastal high hazard area, and to clarify policies to ensure that we are restricting those increases. So that's one thing that the comp plan can do. So I just wanted to point out those two things. Those are ongoing efforts, and I know that mobility and stormwater being a portion of the mobility department, just for those who don't know. I know that stormwater is very much out currently. They have been, since the last storms, cleaning the existing infrastructure to ensure that it works as best as it can. Constantly, if you do see issues in your community, please make sure to follow up with them, with the stormwater and the mobility department, because they're always looking for good leads as to areas that they might not be aware of. So I would just encourage you all to do that as well.
And then I just wanted to add, and I think, Melissa, this is what you were probably starting to add, is that as far as what is in the comp plan, protecting this portion of South Tampa, Port Tampa City, the no bonuses, the clear distinction of we will not support increases in density, as well as Port Tampa actually has one of our context-sensitive neighborhood designations, which will help along with amendments to the land development code to kind of implement that language. It will help kind of control the look, design, some of the mitigation that we are requiring development to go through in our context-sensitive neighborhoods. So that is some ways that the comp plan is thinking about providing protection for our historic and more vulnerable neighborhoods.
All right, and we are running up close to time, and I know we have a couple more questions, so we're going to answer a question from the person, R. Dietz, and a question from Paula. Paula, and we had also gotten your question through email, so those will be the last couple questions, just again to be respectful of everyone's time. So do we want to unmute?
So the person with R Dietz, you should be able to unmute yourself. Again, it's RDIETZ. We see your hand raised. Perhaps you weren't able to use the chat. You should have the ability to unmute yourself. Okay, if the technology isn't working, if you'd like to send us an email, planner@plancom.org, we can respond to you that way. It seems like there might be a technical issue, so we can go ahead and move to the last question, and then I'm putting Carol Ann's in the chat for the future. So Paul, Erica, did you want to read the question that we got? We got a chat from Tom saying that there's a question that she had that she'd like answered. So I think we did get that.
Yes, on page 53, under future land use language, under the overriding public interest definition, it says the city that shall consider the balance of the factors. Who in the city? Is it paid staff? Is it an appointed planning commission? The words such determination shall be decided by a majority vote of city council is being removed, which makes it very clear who is making that decision. So in this new wording, who makes this decision and how are they accountable for that decision? And then there's a second one. So if y'all wanted to answer that one first.
I'll answer the first part of the question. Instead of having that decision determination in the definition, we have added it to the policies where it applies. So, in the policies where such a decision of the determination of overriding public interest is made by Tampa City Council, it's explicitly stated in that policy. There are some instances of overriding public interest that City Council does not make that final determination in some of the policies, and we can certainly chat about those after this meeting. I also would like to say that it says the city shall consider the balance of the factors, and that's just dependent on the type of application where we're applying the overriding public interest test.
Okay, and the second part to that question was the new R10 is adding density. Aren't they allowed to round up in the TRC? 3.3.36 is a one-size-fits-all mentality, making these sweeping changes to R10 and guts the integrity of single-family neighborhoods. There are very small neighborhoods that will be negatively impacted.
Sure, I can address that one. We're really happy to hear that feedback because TRCs is one of the things that council asked us to get feedback on this summer. There is a roundup in the TRCs in the R10. It is very small. So while I think I said last night we are not increasing density in the residential 10, I am remiss that there is a small increase of density in the residential 10 if the roundup is utilized, as well as the TRC bonus. But that would have to be approved through the zoning process and by Tampa City Council as those applications come in. But we've definitely taken your comment into consideration and we do appreciate that feedback.
Alrighty.
Okay.
That was
And,
the last question. Yeah.
Okay, and I put some of the questions that Carol Ann had that we got over email. There was a request that we put those in the chat. We have done so. We'll need to follow up with her separately on those. So since it is 1:31, we're going to go ahead and close out this meeting. Just a couple of final remarks. We'd encourage everyone to sign up for our email list. Encourage your friends and neighbors to sign up. We are going to be holding in-person meetings, district-specific meetings in each of the council districts. And we will be focusing on some of the more specific topics at those meetings, the TRC, the townhomes in the R10. Those were areas that council asked us specifically to get feedback on. Again, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us and have a good afternoon. Thanks.